All right, thank you everyone for being with us for this long. I hope we are making the most of this time together. Yes, so and I want to also welcome our panelists, Professor Kunnuni, Dr. Boyejo, and Professor Umba. So we'll be having a panel session, and in this panel session we'll be discussing issues bordering on the theme for this conference and the topic that Pastor Tinu also addressed. So we'll also be taking questions from the audience. Those that had questions during the keynote presentation and the guest speaker presentation that you didn't have the opportunity, you can ask now, or you can just write it and we'll read it out. So I would start with Professor Kunnuni. The first question I have here is regarding issues of trauma and how trauma is being experienced in Nigeria. So from a sociological perspective, how do social structures and cultural norms influence the way trauma is experienced and addressed in Nigerian communities? How do social structures and cultural norms influence the way trauma is experienced and addressed in Nigerian communities?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So, I'll say that it's important so that we have a clear understanding of what we mean by structure. In society, we have different subsystems that make up the entire social system, and that's what the structure is about. Just like we talk about the structure or the framework or the foundation of a house or a building, society also is built on a structure. And what makes up that structure? The different institutions or the subsystems within the society. So whether you're talking about the family, you're talking about the health system, you're talking about the economic system, governance, or you're talking about the legal system, or say the justice system. These are all the things that make up the social structure of a society. And when talking about the structure, it's also important that we look at the social hierarchies and those determinants of inequality within society, whether it is class, because those things to a large extent determine your life chances, they determine the things you're likely to experience. And the reality is that we are not equally exposed to trauma in life. Some people are more exposed. For instance, if you talk about a thing like flooding, or you talk about epidemic, these are things that affect some people in society than others. Another vector of that inequality is gender, apart from class. Another one may be disability. And so these are things that to a large extent, and these are cultural, these are structural issues. These are the things that make up the structure of society, the different institutions, and then the hierarchy, or the hierarchies that you have within society. And sometimes these vectors also intersect. So you could have, say, gender intersecting with income or class, and these things determine to what extent where we have opportunities in society. Those things determine the advantages or the opportunities we have. They also determine the disadvantages that we have in society. All those things are also governed by certain rules, or if you like, say, laws in society. That is, society itself is governed by rules. Those rules may not be written, but the different institutions, the way they function, there are principles that govern those things in society. We have norms, we have values, we have principles, we have philosophies in the society, and to a large extent these things will determine how people experience trauma and how they are able to address or deal with trauma. So the experience of a woman, for instance, may not necessarily be the experience of a man. Some of the things a woman will be exposed to, and we would have seen it in our society. A 12-year-old girl may be exposed to, may be vulnerable in some areas that a 12-year-old boy may not be as vulnerable. There are things like that. Somebody living in a slum may be more vulnerable or more exposed to certain risks in society than others. So all those things, all the structural issues, the different institutions and the different vectors of inequality in society, to a large extent, will determine how we experience trauma. They will also determine what kind of care or support we can access. If two people experience, say, flooding, one person may in the next 2-3 hours be able to relocate. And that's why sometimes when they talk about people evacuating in Nigeria, in some communities, it's just a wish, because people are in a very poor state. They don't have that social capital. They don't have people to run to. They don't have anything in their accounts. And then you're telling them to evacuate. The question is how and where do they go?
That's right.
But for some other people, if you say evacuate, there are people in this country, for instance, who can leave Nigeria this night. If there is an accident, if there is a disaster, they can leave this country today. But there are others, in the next 3-4 years, they're still struggling. They can't. And so these are the things that determine how people variably experience trauma, and also how they can access care and support.
Thank you very much for that elaborate explanation. But this, all along, well, I was following the train of your thought, and all of this looked really, really academic. But let's look at it practically. You know, would you say that the Nigerian structure makes people susceptible to trauma? Like, is the structure of Nigeria, the way we are, generally speaking, does it make people really susceptible to trauma? Is Nigeria traumatizing people, really?
Yes. I mean, that's the sad reality. Nigeria is very traumatizing. When you have millions of people living in poverty, that's a recipe for trauma. When you have, which means that if there is anything, if there is any shock, there is no way to wriggle out of it, because many of them are living in poverty. Poverty is a major determinant of how you will experience trauma.
Thank you very much. So, riding on this, the next question I will ask is, I'll ask Professor Umba, and I'm looking at this because he's also a pastor, you know. So now that we have established that Nigeria, the structure in Nigeria, you know, makes Nigerians susceptible to trauma, the question is, many survivors wrestle with the question of faith, such as, why did God allow this? You know, in our trauma healing program, our first lesson number 1 says, if God loves us, why do we suffer? If God loves us, why are we in Nigeria? So people are wondering, why were they even born in Nigeria in the first place? You know, so this question is, why, you know, many survivors of trauma wrestle with this question of faith, such that why did God allow this to happen? So how should pastors and church leaders address such deep spiritual struggles in the face of trauma? How do you reconcile the love of God and the experience of trauma?
It says, in this world there shall be tribulations. And I think it behoves us to know, ordinarily, for instance, if you're born again, you should go to heaven.
Okay.
You should just go to heaven. However, you know, Paul said, for me to die is gain, and for me to live. But however, there is a work to do. Spirituality is not individualism. You are saved to save another. So it's actually in the course of serving another that you are traumatized. Because the fellow you want to save is not saved, and you must share in his challenges and situations. And it's in the process of sharing in his challenges and situations that you tend to go through some certain anomalies, which seemingly is not the will of God. But because you would have to do that work, then you will have to go through it. So you are not going through it because God is not concerned with you. Ordinarily, I mean, that wouldn't be the place of God if the person you are rescuing does not see the hand of God. So in the process of doing all of that, the person says, oh, look, this must be God. This is the situation, these are the circumstances I'm going through. And something is able to intervene. And therefore, that thing must be supernatural. So we must realize that we're on passage, we're on pilgrimage. The moment you said, I accept Jesus as my Lord and personal Savior, you are no longer a candidate for this life. But like I said, you must have to do certain things to fulfill the entire purposes of God, which is to save another. And in the process of saving that person, you go through some strange experiences. But in all of that, God is still with you because He's not going to consume you. In the end, you would also find out, except in the process of rescuing somebody, he becomes a victim. But if you are able to go through that, then in the end, you will find out that there wasn't a subtraction. There wasn't anything, strange in all of that experiences you go through. For a believer, I mean, it's entirely a different ball game. The strange things we go through is a different ball game. Jesus said, "My peace I give unto you, not as the world gives." And that peace is the fact that in the mix of all of that, you are cheerful, you cheer up, you are okay, and you are floating.
Amen. Hallelujah. All right. So my next question is to Dr. Boyejo. We have looked at trauma from the sociological perspective, from the spiritual perspective. Now let's look at it from the from psychiatric perspective. So from your clinical experience as a psychiatrist, what are the most common psychological impacts of trauma in the Nigerian societies? That's one. And then, how can psychiatrists effectively collaborate with faith leaders to ensure that trauma survivors receive both spiritual and clinical support? Because there has to be a balance. All right, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon, their house. Well, maybe I should even start by defining what trauma is. What trauma is. It's anything that overwhelms you. So it could be as small as I've been broke for 2 weeks. Some people they can be broke for 6 months and they're not traumatized in any way. So from that point of view, and I've noticed that Nigerians are very resilient. I don't know how Prof sees that. Nigerians are very resilient when it comes to rugged and traumatic experiences. There's this aspect of us that is really, really strong, and I guess it's a genetic or DNA or God-given superpower. Yeah. Now, so most things that would cause trauma all over the world probably will not cause it in Nigeria. So that's our makeup. So for those that now eventually see an situation as trauma, the most common thing that occurs with trauma is anxiety, acute stress disorder, which comes in the form of anxiety, and people they're just afraid, and they lose concentration, and all of them tied together become some form of anxiety. And like I said, Nigerians are very resilient, and it's naturally would fizzle out because it would naturally resolve on its own. We're talking about talk therapy. and we are wired to talk to our next neighbor. We live in communities, and that's our first natural form of therapy. I will talk to the next person. This is what I went through. God will do it. And so the treatment of trauma is most likely to your next door neighbor, and pastors actually receive more persons that have been traumatic than physicians. So we are the ones collaborating with the pastors, because everybody goes to see the pastor before they come to see the psychiatrist. So of course, and the smallest thing at home, the man has not brought in money for some few days, they go and report to pastor, and pastor would resolve things. And he has actually healed them. He has done a therapeutic intervention. So pastors are not just, well, for me, they're not just doing those spiritual things. They are psychologists. There are so many things rolled into one for people. So, well, I would, where psychiatrists will now come in is in the area of referral. There are some things that talk therapy will not help with. I mean, natural talk therapy would not help with. So at that level, you must encourage people to seek professional care. So we are the ones collaborating with pastors. Pastors are the first point of care in Nigeria. So yeah, that's the truth. I'm hearing strange voices, saying strange things. Let me go and speak to my pastor. So most times, pastors are even the ones we should educate to refer on time. Yeah, thank you very much.
Psychological impact of trauma, because there are people that, you know, after going through some traumatic experience, they start having psychological issues. So how can you just shed some light on that?
Say it in another way. The most common psychological impact of trauma is anxiety disorder, stress disorder. And most people, in fact, that's the first reaction. People are startled, people are afraid, people are, they are unsettled. So, and which is natural, which is normal. And people naturally, those things will naturally resolve. However, in some cases, based on several other factors, some might not resolve. And then it could lead to substance use in people, because they now want to medicate that anxiety they are having. Some people that have family history of psychiatric illness may actually develop psychotic illness, might start behaving irrationally. Some people could go even into depression. I've seen people that I've seen patients that after trauma they become manic. Manic is having a sense of self-worth, becoming, talking excessively, believe grandiose belief, and those things. So it's aftermath of not that first reaction, that acute stress not resolving, could now lead to several other psychological problems. And some people that have family history of full-blown psychosis would actually break down. So we could actually extend the effect of traumatic experience to several psychiatric disorder or psychological problems, as the case may be. But like I've said, it is a natural thing to have stress, that acute stress that comes with trauma. And like I said, it will resolve naturally. And with the help of people around, things get better. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
We can say that trauma can affect people psychologically, and it can actually. Okay, so the next question goes to Professor Kunnuni, and now we are looking at addressing issues of trauma, right? And we're looking at in what ways do community networks, such as religious groups, traditional councils, and family units, either support or hinder trauma healing? In what ways do community networks, such as religious groups, traditional councils, family units, how do these networks support or hinder trauma healing, as the case may be?
I believe that that question has been partly answered. The truth is that Okay, so we can look at resilience at different levels, at the level of the individual, at the level of the community. At the level of the individual, you talk about resilience if people are flexible and they are able to respond to whatever shock is coming their way. If they have problem solving capacity, if there is self efficacy, they know how to handle the situation. For instance, some people, when hit with shock, will become numb. They can't even process things, they can't think about things clearly. Okay, so that's why we're talking about resilience at the level of the individual. But at the level of the community, there are those indicators of resilience also. For instance, the social capital, the trusts, the support people get from family, from friends. And I want to say that, yes, I agree that pastors can be like first responders, but first the family. Because that's the starting point. If a child is going through anything, the first person who should, all things being equal, observe will be the parents, and in most cases maybe the mother. If you have a survivor of rape, for instance, if you are a very sensitive person as a mother, you can see that child may become withdrawn. You can see those signs that something is not right. And so the social network, the people, the society, starting with the family, can pick some of these things. The school can also pick some of these things. In some countries of the world, when children come, their teachers will start asking them, did anybody beat you? Did this happen to you? Sometimes they check their bodies to see signs. Okay, and that tells you that that society is primed to pick those signs, because it's not in all cases that the victim is able to talk about it or will want to talk about it. And so the society plays a major role here. The community, the religious institutions, they all play key roles in identifying these issues, this problem, and then also in providing support. But like she said, it's also possible that those who should provide that support may lack the skills required, and that becomes a problem. Also, another thing we should give attention to is how we frame and define trauma. In some places, things that are traumatic have been normalized.
Relativity.
And so even if you are going through that stress, it will be dismissed. People will say that you are just stupid. What has happened to you that has not happened to others? But you really don't know what that person is going through. And so these are the things the society can be an asset, and that's why we talk about the capital. So you can have social capital in the sense that you have a society that has that social that body of social resources that you can draw from to deal with whatever you're going through. But you can also have a social deficit, so to say, which means that the society is configured to either worsen or just look away from your trauma.
So, still talking about addressing the issue of trauma and resilience, I have a question for Professor Umba, still from the pastoral perspective. What pastoral strategies can help congregations build resilience in times of national crisis, conflict, or displacement?
My keynote address, I did confess the fact that pastors need training in that wise, and we're advocating embedding, encapsulating psychology, sociology in the curriculum, in pastoral curriculum. And now, having said that, yeah, the doctor said something. I mean, they come to us not really because they were referred to us. And so some pastors, because that collaboration is not there, are not, acting well. I want to say part of what we're having here is an attempt for such a collaboration. It's from a different and so we are sharing knowledge in that wise. But then also, no pastor, no matter how frustrated it is, would want to refer a traumatized Christian to an unbelieving psychologist.
Why not?
And so the believing psychologists, sociologists, and the rest of them would confess the fact that we engage them. Even though there's a limit to which we can do that, because the pastors themselves will need some level of training, which I have repeatedly said here and advocating for such subjects. So once in a while, there should be fora where different disciplines in common faiths who believe in Christ will come together and then rub minds. I did say something when I began. I'm sure some of us would have forgotten. God, in bringing together the evangelists of the Synoptic Gospel, was careful to have the three key fields encompassing. He brought a finance man, Matthew, then as a tax collector. That was an accountant, qualified accountant in those days, the tax collectors. And he brought in Mark. Mark has never done anything outside discipleship, spirituality. And then he brought the medical. So every other discipline for me draw from these three conjoint core areas. So that means if we collaborate, if we bring together all of this to bear, then we will have traumatic situations resolved.
Yes, still talking about collaboration and integration. A question for Dr. Jumoke. How can mental health professionals integrate culturally sensitive practices while still maintaining evidence-based psychiatric care? Because we are looking at culturally sensitive, we are looking at, okay, maybe from the family, from the church, all of those things, they matter to them. But at the same time, they may not have that evidence-based, rigor of psychiatrists. So how do you integrate all of this to bring a holistic care for trauma?
Well, there's no evidence-based if it is not adapted to the culture. The evidence-based is just to give you the theoretical background on which you build your practice, clinical practice on. I can't, let's assume, even as easy as language. I can't be speaking to you if you don't understand my language. Of course, I'll get someone that understands your language. If you're a woman in that comes to, they won't refer to a man to see. They will tell you woman to see. They will want to see. Psychiatry is based on from what cultural perspective are you coming from. So like I would tell people, when people talk about evidence-based, it's not like cast in stone. There must be adaptation. It must be relevant to your culture for you to implement it. I can't implement what was done in Harvard now. I will have to adapt it to my own culture to be able to affect the people. And that's what the training is about. So people see professionals at that other hand, and they see just books. No, practice is not like that. Practice is your ability to implement it, putting your culture, putting the cultural perspective, putting the patient individualized form of care into perspective for you to be able to deliver care. So there's nothing like evidence-based without adaptation to that person, individualized care. And individualized care means you've taken the culture of that person, you've taken the circumstance of that person into perspective before, so that the outcome becomes good. You can never get result without putting those factors in place for you to get the proper outcome. Even the religion, everything that the sociologist would think of, you must put it you must put it into cognizance for you to be able to treat a patient. That's why sometimes when I see a patient, I'm like, what's this patient's social status? Some patients can never come to Yaba psychiatry. They will never be well. Not because we are not giving, but this same me will go and see such a patient in an hospital that's like a 7-star hotel, and they would be well. And that place they will pay like, maybe let's assume 5 million, but they are telling you to come to Jaba psychiatry to pay 15,000 naira and receive the same care. They will never get well because of their own individualized circumstance.
Yeah.
So it's really important for everybody for pastors to know that sometimes you have to bend over. I see Muslims, I see everybody, and I had to learn some verses in the Quran to be able to even treat them, to be able to attend to them. So being a professional means you are flexible enough to accommodate as many people as possible to be able to deliver care. Thank you very much.
So if you have questions, you can write your questions and pass it, and we can also yes, just one or two, then we go back to it. Okay. All right. Okay. Yes, sir. We'll make it very, very fast. We'll take it intermittently. After I taking some, I'll ask the question so that we can, and you can also write your. Okay, maybe you should just write it. Yes, maybe you should write it. Yes, I think it's better you write it so that we will not spend too much time. So now let's look at the issue of stigma. That was on the first presentation. Stigma. And Professor Kunnuni, the question here goes to you. We say the question has to do with issue of stigma, and in many faith-based and traditional communities, mental health issues are often stigmatized. What sociological factors contribute to this stigma, and how can they be dismantled?
I'll say that a major contributory factor is the health belief. People have different beliefs when it comes to what causes illness and how you should seek care, and that plays a major role. For instance, when you talk about stigma, you're talking about that mark that's been placed, not necessarily a physical mark. In the past it was a physical mark, but it's possible that there is an idea or a belief that this person is carrying a mark that separates them for, or sets them aside for discrimination or for a bad kind of treatment. And that's what stigma does. A major reason sometimes is the belief that that person is carrying a curse. So sometimes people are stigmatized because the people believe that maybe they have offended the gods, and whatsoever they are going through is the right punishments for them. It's for that reason that in many societies and among indigenous peoples, you still see this a lot. There is the belief that anything that has to do with psychological or psychiatric disorder cannot be treated using biomedicine. So there is that belief that because the causation itself is not biomedical, then the solution can't be biomedical, and so they want to seek solutions outside. So some people, for instance, believe that if you have a psychiatric problem, there are certain rituals that you should be looking to do instead of taking tablets, for for instance, or looking in the direction of a kind of therapy. In some cases, if, for instance, the trauma is associated with conflict, in some communities, it's believed that there must be cleansing because some things have been done. Maybe you have placed a curse on the land, and so to reverse it, there must be cleansing before all of that can happen. So sometimes when people have mental health challenges, members of society believe that they're carrying a curse, and it is for that reason that they are stigmatized. And stigma itself makes it difficult, if not impossible, for the sufferer to benefit from any form of support, because they will be isolated. They won't get the care they should. People will treat them poorly. People will deny them care because of the belief that the causation itself is spiritual. And that's the gap we really need to bridge here. Those who believe in spiritual causation and those who hold on to biomedical causation, or maybe things that can be explained scientifically. You want to explain, okay, this is what is responsible scientifically. But there are others who believe that it is more spiritual than scientific. And so there lies the disagreement, or the reason why we work in silos, because one person believes that whatever you're going through is purely scientific. Another person believes that it is spiritual. You have offended the God. And I'm sure that Dr. Jumoke will not buy that story. That whatever you are going through this because you offended some gods, so you are not likely to. So
thank you very much.
Yes, say something about access. That stigmatization can affect access to care.
yeah.
Because when people feel stigmatized, they may not even want to own up or come seek care and all of that. And with that, I have this question for Dr. Boyejo. So, with limited access to psychiatric care in rural areas, and of course, most of those beliefs are also predominant in rural areas and among indigenous population. So, with limited access to psychiatric services in rural area, what community-driven or low-resource interventions can help bridge the mental health gap? How can we bridge that gap to let people to understand that this thing is not spiritual? I mean, they can actually seek help, so how can we bridge that gap?
Okay, thank you very much. Funnily, well, I believe that anything that happens to us, there is a spiritual aspect of it. So even my coming here today is spiritual. Your coming here today is spiritual. And so for me, I believe that, so when things happen, I believe that there's a place of faith and works. So I tell my patients, Dr. Boyejo, prayer. I said, yeah, you have to pray. Even for this medication to work, you need prayer. And the fact that there is even the medication that works for you is the work of prayers. So after using this medication, for those that believe in testimony, go and give a testimony in your church that your pastor gave you, your doctor gave you a medication, and it worked. And it must work hand in hand together. Well, like he said, in the rural areas, mental health care is not as far as they think. When they go to their health center, there is first aid they could get there. But because of the belief system that it is spiritual, they won't even go at all. And until it becomes so bad. In most areas, in most villages, there is this community health center. So if you go there, the stigma won't allow them go. What will the nurse say? The nurse will now go and tell, and the nurses are trained not even to to be confidential about people's cases. So when people go to those primary health care centers and complain about something, they would get help. And like I've said, it is not the same way the hand can be sick, the leg can be sick, so can the mind be sick. And once we know that, and the same way that diabetic patients don't get fully cured sometimes. Some people at the early stage of diabetes, they will be fully cured and they are fine, and the glucose in them, and they will be fine. Just the same way, early treatment, better prognosis. So once we assess care on time, it doesn't have to be lifelong care. And where it is meant to be lifelong care, when as soon as you are functional, functionality is attained. Glory be to God.
Amen.
Thank you.
Still along that line, some faith traditions emphasize spiritual warfare over medical explanations of trauma. As Professor Kunnuni and Dr. Jumoke has also alluded to. How can pastors balance spiritual beliefs with the need for clinical intervention? How do you create that balance?
Spirituality. Now, maybe how to explain this. Spirituality in terms of invisible realms and spirituality in terms of divinity. And so when we speak of spirituality, it does not entirely portray divinity. Because somebody can have a spiritual inclination and yet is not godly. And so we should be careful when we say the attachment of spirituality into certain issues. And then, having said that, maybe maybe come from the perspective of stigmatization, that there is nothing like stigmatization in the Bible. The Bible has taken care of that. As a matter of fact, the more negative you are, the more positive you tend to become. So that means the Bible tells you, look, there is nothing like you are rejected. In fact, your rejection is stronger than the accepted. And then we should also understand the fact that stigmatization in scripturally is abstract. Actually, is stereotypical. It's just something that people create in their mind that is far from reality. Scripture will tell you that God uses the poor to confine the rich. To mean that if you are poor, I said it, you are not rejected. He uses the sick. In fact, at some point Jesus said, no, I didn't come for those who are accepted. I came for those who are rejected. That means if you think you are stigmatized, then you are a candidate for Jehovah. So what the church probably does that people misinterpret is the fact that every anomaly or everything that is normal has its foundation on spirituality, on God. That if you don't meet with God first, then you are meeting with man. And Bible says with God all things are possible, but with men it's impossible. So that means you're already portraying, by making God, putting God out of it, you are already accepting the impossibility of the intervention. And that's what I wanted to understand about the church perception, the spiritual perception of warfare. Again, I want to conclude by saying, yes, pastors need training. We will need to integrate this psychological, sociological intent into our spiritual recipe, deliverables. But then it begins with God and must also end with God. Anything outside that, every other effort is such that will collapse with time.
It's going to Dr. Jumoke and Dr. Boyejo, and because it has to do with, okay, I will just read it out. And it says the economic situation in Nigeria is alarming. A patient that has no money has money can easily have access to treatment, but somebody who cannot has issues. Is it possible that psychiatrists can help with some level of charity when facilitators refer, especially trauma healing facilitators? And that's really true, because there are cases where you go for a session with a psychiatrist and they'll tell you just a session could be 50,000 naira, and this person has never had breakfast. So the person is like, will I just go my mental problem and just be myself? So, but really, how can psychiatrists and the psychiatrist institutions help in that regard? Because this has to do with structural issue that Professor Kunnuni was talking about, economic deprivation. how can you help, ma?
Poverty is sometimes in the mind. I will start by saying that. Of course, the economy is not good, and I totally accept. But I've learned that people have, when we think as a church, okay, let me tell you, after work yesterday, there's this church I branch, they would have they have patients waiting. And sometimes those that can't pay, I will see. Some, they don't pay less than maybe a third of what I would normally, or the fifth of what I would normally collect. But I will see everybody, and the pastor is making impact. Those that can't pay, the church pays for the medication, and they are fine. But the point is, the pastor has made efforts. The pastor has realized that, look, there's a place for expert care. So on my way home, it doesn't cost me anything. 1 hour, 1.5 hours, I'm done and I go home.
That's right.
So it's about collaboration.
It's a collaboration. It's about collaboration.
So it's about collaboration. And I keep telling people, that look, I totally agree. I grew up in a very conservative Christian home. But we must bring in innovations. The church must bring in innovations. And I was telling my daughter when I was going, look, this thing they are doing here is so fantastic. So the church tells that this person, no family. So I know that I shouldn't even write expensive medication for those ones. And he said, and I'll ask who pays. The ministry pays. I should not worry. And so that means there's care. So even if they don't have money, there's care. It's right. Just for the pastors to want to accept that somebody can come and see. It's just for the pastor to know that, look, let me refer this person. Let them come together. In my church in KIC, she goes to KIC. Every last Sunday of the month, we see patients. And the church has bought these medications, and there are 3 doctors, nurses, all of us volunteers, and we see patients every month. So we'll give them 1 month's appointment, and they are sane. So I don't want us to start thinking the economy. What about our innovation? What about us bringing ideas together? And that's where I'll stand. Thank you very much.
How can we help adults of over 40 years to overcome any form of pre or post-marital challenges? Should their cases be limited to the church alone? So marital challenges, does it require psychological care, or is just a church matter, or is sociological care? So who will answer that question? Okay, I'll come ask Professor Kunnuni. So pre or post marital challenges, because it could be traumatizing too. So should it be restricted to the church alone, or?
I'll say that marital challenges can be really traumatizing. And so, like we were saying earlier, sometimes we normalize these things, and so people don't get care, and so we shouldn't be part of the problem. So don't laugh at that person. In fact, there are so many psychiatric patients whose issues were triggered by marital issues. So it's a serious matter. And if we say that it should be handled only by the church, we will be defeating the essence of this gathering.
Absolutely.
The idea is that
the collaboration.
All the major players come together to address the issue. And I'm happy with what Professor Mba has said so far. All of us as believers, it's our responsibility to now begin to discourage this approach where they will start saying you must fast for so. They will tie them down in some places. They will be using, and that's the reality. These things happen here in our society. In the name of spiritual healing, these things happen. And so wherever we see that, wherever we sense things like that are happening, we should report. We shouldn't keep quiet. The ones who do the right thing are the ones we have heard about. Those who call experts. Once they know that they can't handle the issues, then they get the psychiatrists involved. But those ones who start prescribing all sorts of spiritual formulas. You fast for those number of days. They will separate them. The isolation itself can be traumatizing. Dry fasting. So as much as possible, those extremes we should avoid, and as much as possible we should work together as a team.
Thanks. Yeah.
I will direct it to Professor Umba because it's quite interesting. In fact, the person actually wrote Professor Stewart Umbasa. So for you, he said, please, sir, there's an urgent need for help from a very close family friend. The husband traveled to Nigeria, listening to the man of God that says Jesus is coming back soon and will be taking him with them. Only these groups of will be taking with him only this group of persons who are from family, friends, and all. So the family, and they have been praying day and night. Is this a psychological, mental, or spiritual issue? What can be done? So Professor, over to you, sir.
All of that. Let me say this. I think that was coming from Apostle Paul himself. He said the Bereans brethren were more honorable than their brethren in Thessalonica, because after they have had Paul, not just any person, Paul, an authority himself, they will go back home. And that's what I call context and not protest. They will contest the scriptures. If somebody is saying the Lord is coming tomorrow, where is it in the scriptures? Even Jesus himself said, I don't know. He showed the signs. Signs good, except they are calculating the signs as a function of the time. That means the signs have been consummated 100%. Therefore, they act. But that is not invisible. That is not true. So I think, like we have all agreed here, it's a combination of several issues which involve spirituality. Because sometimes people fall prey to such stupid exegesis because they have no money. Because they are illiterates. Because I don't see why an educated person can be so easily convinced. I mean, an educated unbeliever cannot be easily convinced to that extent. So sometimes it's just a mere mental deficit. He has, he need to tidy his mind, this mental obligation. It's not spirituality. So at this extent, therefore, he needs the church, he needs the psychologist, he needs the sociologist. In fact, he needs financial experts.
and those are personality.
Yeah, some people in UK are people who are poorer in UK than some folks here. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. So there's this question that says, at what point of overwhelming situation should one bring a person for psychiatric care? You know, at what point, when you are overwhelmed by, maybe situation, maybe financial challenge, at what point do you feel that this is getting overwhelming and I need to reach psychiatric? And you gave a context. Say some women cannot reveal their challenges to their pastors. They prefer a community where they will get care and that will not use them to preach. I think that has to do with stigma and all. He said, I have many of them in my NGO. So that's issue of how do you prevent, because some people too, they discuss their overwhelming situation with people they treat on the altar and they become more traumatized, And then it says, can medication treat a traumatized patient? that her problem is money to take care of her children. So basically, I think this is a general question. I'll just leave it. For Dr. Jumoke, the last question. Somebody is having overwhelming financial challenge. Can it lead to psychiatric issue, and at what point? How can somebody like that seek help?
Well, we said trauma. When something becomes overwhelming for you. And of course, it is not at the point of it being overwhelming that we need to see psychiatric care. It's when functionality is impaired. So it's not every, of course, Omiyalewa, it's going to be very traumatic. But I'm still coping. I can still go to work. I can still put things together. You might not even, you just need your neighbor's support, communal support will see you through such things. But at the point at which you cannot sleep, there's decline in personal hygiene, you cannot function at work, your relationship with others is becoming affected, there might be a need to seek help at that time. And that's how to judge. Like I've told you, stressors are meant, it's meant to affect you, to upset your things around you a bit. But as soon as it's affecting functionality and it's becoming persistent. Somebody tell you that they can't sleep for 1 month, please seek care. But at the same time, some people tell you they can't sleep for 2 days. Well, maybe family support, talk therapy would really help out. So, and he said someone that has financial problems. Of course, medication will not treat financial problems. No, definitely. But let me tell you something. When you come to let's assume someone has financial problems and becoming then alongside being psychotic, we will treat the biology, the abnormal behavior and the other things. The social worker takes it up from there and tries to solve those other financial problems. We might have to reach out to relatives to help. So when we talk about care in a psychiatric hospital, mental health care, it's medication, psychological and social care all together. And that is what makes psychology, that what makes the full mental health care. So you can see, I've had to beg husbands, I've had to beg wives to help my patients. That's the man that looks at, we need your help, madam, come back home. That is not medication. It's just a form of social care, because we know that this guy has drug problems, and when the guy confessed himself that, look, my wife is a very strict person, would really be of help. Will this woman come? Well, let's talk to her. Then we have to call such women, and they would come and will settle, and they go back home and they are living happily ever after. And the woman is a form of informal support system for this man. So it's not just about medication. It's about, you treat the symptoms that's coming from the financial problems. Then we can't just leave. The financial issues should now be solved. How do we work it out? Do we have to reach out to people? Do you have to reach out to your church? Do you have to reach out to people around you? And that's the informal system that will take care of other things. At the end, there's holistic care. Thank you very much.
There's a question that says, do Christian professionals and therapists know when their interventions are not sufficient and need spiritual intervention? Yoruba will say, "Eteselebo." So do they know when to test a labor, or it must be done medical or not? How do you know at what point that your intervention is not intervening?
But the question I just told us is that we are
Collaborating.
It's spiritual. So I'm sure when you tell us that you want to pray, I'll tell you go and pray. Let's continue. So even from the beginning, even the fact that from the beginning we must continue to pray. So there's nothing like the spiritual has stopped or the medication has stopped. Of course, when I'm done with treatment, I would tell you to go home and do every other thing that you think is helpful for you. You'll be encouraged to do it. So I really, sometimes people just separate as if the gods are somewhere, medicine is somewhere. No. It's collaborative, it's biopsychosocial. And you see people, they'll tell you they want to come and pray. Okay, please come, just don't make noise, don't disturb other patients. And they because that's their belief system. And you allow them. Why do hospitals have churches in them? Have you noticed that most hospitals would have
chapels?
Yeah, there are chapels. It shows that it's collaborative care. Why do hospitals have mosque in them? Because that is what you believe, then you pray. So I don't want us to think that doctors, they are just in one world in Mars, planet Mars, and other people are in the... No, it's collaborative care. Right now, Yaba Psychiatry and also a church is being built. The Anglican church beside us, they come to a church service right in the hospital. So what does that mean? It's everything together. Because for me, and I'll tell you, prayer is therapeutic. Prayer is scientific. It's because even the psych that there's a supernatural hand in my case, it helps you. So that's psychology. So that is even where the psychological care starts from. So when you say you want to pray, I'll tell you, please do, because that is where it's therapeutic. So pray. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Let me add to that. How would you know that it's not malaria but typhoid that you have? It's very simple, isn't it? You've treated malaria and it is still there. Therefore, the doctor will advise you to take typhoid medicine. It's very easy. If it is spiritual, then prayer would have solved it. But having prayed, and you are sure you have prayed, I'm sure that God will tell you, refer him to a medical doctor. So at what point do you know that it's not spiritual? Spiritual has been done in all intent and purposes. And at what point would you know that it's not psychology? All the psychological efforts have been made, and they still manifested. So the collaboration takes effect. It's a team effect, an interdependent. Go for a pastor to pray for you. At some point, I believe in divine healing, but I still make use of the lab in order to know what exactly is wrong with me, so that I can speak faith to God. I can specifically tell God, heal me malaria. And how would I know it's malaria? Because the lab test says so. So I'm still exploring the medical. How would I know it's psychological? Because the psychologist told me. So I go to God to pray. God, encourage me. So these things are interwoven. It's a team effect. It's synergistic. And that is why all of us seated here as spiritual people must integrate all these social fields to have a holistic believer whom we desire.
Thank you so much. I just give a round of applause for the panel session. And to round off this session, I'm going to ask one last question, and all the panelists will answer, give their point of view. And the question is, how do you envision collaboration between psychiatrists, the church, sociologists, and other therapists? I mean, what practical strategies can be employed to strengthen this collaboration between religious leaders, healthcare professionals, community stakeholders in addressing trauma collectively? What are the strategies, and how can this kind of furrow, how can we continue to collaborate and bring about trauma healing to the society? Professor Kunnuni, maybe you will start.
So I believe that what we are doing here now is one way to sustain that partnership, and we should continue to help ourselves understand that nobody can stand alone. We are better working together. The moment one discipline or one field is removed and you think you can stand alone, then we start having issues. Just like Dr. Jumoke had said earlier, that you are doing one does not mean you have to pause the other. So that you are giving psychiatric care does not mean you have to stop praying. You can pray, but at the same time we should be sensitive to those abuses that some people refer to as spiritual intervention. Like the example you were given, the moment they are telling you to test a labor, be careful. They may not be saying that you should just attack the issue spiritually. Rather, they want you to do some things that are not helpful. If it is just about praying, there is nothing that says that you must take that person away from the psychiatrist to pray. So while the person is receiving psychiatric care, you can pray. It's not a problem. Okay? And you can do other things. And like she said, many of the spiritual activities themselves are therapeutic. Just clapping and singing is therapeutic. Dancing heals. Meeting other people, fellowship, those things are all therapeutic. So you can do those things without removing that psychiatric care. The moment you start separating them, you say pause this one so that we can do it spiritually, then know that that's a red flag. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yeah. Maybe I should explain what divine healing means to me. The medication working is divine. It is not just laying hands that is divine healing. The medication working is divine.
Yes.
So I want all the pastors to know that it's about, for every illness, biopsychosocial, and religion can come under that social care. Biological care, that's medicine, the talk therapy care, and the social care, in which we say addressing those social factors around to make this person whole. And so, and those, everything must work together. And there's, I don't know when people tell me that it's spiritual problem. Every problem, I've told you my coming here is spiritual. Everything we do has a God hand in it. So at every point in time, even the medication working, it has to be God. So as you are taking it, God, let this medication work. So at no point can you say, I think medicine is not working. Of course, there are some times that medication might it might be a long-term treatment. It doesn't mean medicine is not working. It just means that the other care must go in hand in hand. I tell people that some illness, it's a lifelong treatment. It doesn't mean medicine. Some people are hypertensive and they are living till age 100 and they've achieved everything they are potentially meant to achieve. And so it doesn't mean medicine is not working. You know that this type of illness, it needs management. And with God on your side, on our side, we'll achieve whatever we want to achieve. So I don't see any difference between the two. We can't remove the two from each other. We must work together, and knowledge guides our decision. Thank you very much.
Okay, maybe just like summarizing my keynote message. Prof is here. That's what we call borrowed courses. For instance, if you are engineering and you're doing some management courses, the management courses are borrowed courses to the engineering students. And why would an engineer do management courses? So that he will be a total productive person. In the event that he becomes a leader, a manager. Because an engineer can become, a sociologist can become. So what we are advocating, and I will classify it into two, what I call class effects and practical or field effects. The sociologists should start introducing spiritual courses into their curriculum. And the theologians should also start introducing, like I told you, we're already advocating. The Bible colleges will be doing sociology, they will be doing psychology. Of course, we're already doing management and finance in Bible colleges. So why not these social courses? So the class effect, which means in the classroom, which is, the foundational platform, not just as we meet here. This is a field effect. this is a practical effect. What it should start from the class. If it starts from the class, then it can be enhanced better, and in the end, we'll have a total healing for the people and for the nation.
Thank you very much. The panel session. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.